Welcome guys to another episode of The Extra Mile. My name is Alex and welcome to a, let's say, reality versus sim comparison. While the track day is still fresh in my mind, I thought it would be a good idea to compare real life to the sim and what did I think was the same, what did I think was different. So let's get right into it. Let's go for a drive here. So first of all, I gotta say that what was very interesting is that I immediately had a feel of knowing the track when I first drove it for real. I drove onto this start-finish straight and I thought, hey, okay, I know this. I know that there's a chicane coming up. I know that I have to take this in second gear. And that was, in a way, really surprising to me. But on the other hand, it shouldn't be surprising because, well, that's why you race in sim racing, because you want to get to know these tracks. I bet that if I were to drive at Laguna Seca or Spa for real tomorrow, that it would be similar, that you really have a feeling of, you know, this place already. That was really cool. So the first obvious difference was, well, pretty self-explanatory. You don't have any G-forces. You don't get a sense of how bumpy the track is, although that might be in part due to the modeling. This is a really smooth surface. The real track had quite a few bumps and cracks in the surface. But yeah, the very obvious difference, which we can't solve for now, is that you don't feel the G-forces. You don't feel the car lean. You don't feel how close you are to the limit as well as you do in the real car, and that is the biggest difference, but again, that is self-explanatory. Now, what was also very interesting is not necessarily the differences, because they were to be expected, but what was the same. And the handling of this car, even though it is a mod car, this is not an official Kunos car, was pretty much spot on. I mean, take this corner for example. I do have some traction issues here in second gear. I have to watch my throttle input a little bit, roll on it instead of stomp on it, and it was exactly the same with the real car on the real track. This is another example. I can put all the power down in third gear when I am driving the right line, and that was exactly the same on the real track as well. I thought that there would be more obvious differences between the grip levels between the sim and real life, but to be honest, it was very, very, very similar. Same for this corner here, the fast right-hander. Obviously I did not drive on the grass in real life. Cornering speeds might be a tad higher here. That's maybe the only difference, is that the overall grip limit might be a smidge, just a smidge higher here in the sim than it was in real life. But the balance of the car, the way that I can't just floor it in that left-hander, but have to, you know, feather the throttle just a little bit, all of that is very, very, very similar. In fact, I was surprised about how similar it was. So let's brake. Overall, the driving experience between Assetto Corsa and real life was a lot more on the same page than it was different. Little bit of rotation when you force it a bit, when you want it a little bit, exactly the same as it was in real life. You could get the tail out there a little bit. I did that a little bit in the last lap of the last stint, the second one. Absolutely identical. Straight line speed, another thing. Let's see how fast we get here. I got to, I think, 245 or something in real life. Almost exactly the same. That's maybe another difference. The real car seemed to have a tiny little bit more straight line speed, but we're talking 3 or 4% maybe. Ah, nice. A lot of grip here in third gear, the same as it was in real life. So the biggest difference, apart from the G-forces, in terms of the driving experience, is the road surface. The real track, as I said, had quite a few bumps and cracks in the surface that you felt when you drove over them. And they are missing here. But the overall layout is perfect. The way the track is angled here, for example, a little bit to the left, and then in the subsequent corner a little bit to the right, is perfect. So yeah, overall I was very impressed with how well I could prepare for the real track day by driving the mod track with a mod car in Assetto Corsa. Now if we're talking official Kunos content, the gap might even be a little bit closer. Depending on the car, of course. Maybe some cars are harder to get right than others. So things like this that you do naturally without even thinking about it in Sims, where you kind of take a little bit too much speed in that fast right-hander, oversteer a little bit. You would not do that in real life because you feel the speed and the G-forces and you just don't want to die. So you naturally approach a corner and its limits from the other way, from the other side, from the slow side, and build up a little bit, where in Sims you tend to go a little bit too fast, maybe at first, and then dial it down. So in real life, obviously, you tend to do that exactly the other way around. Also with braking points, there's no mechanical sympathy, so to speak, in Sims. You just torture the car for hours on end. In real life, I did not really stomp on the brake as hard as I could and try to push the braking point to its absolute limit, because, you know, I didn't want the brakes to fail at the end of the stint. I tried to be a little bit cautious with how I apply the braking forces. So that's another difference. In real life, you have a real car that you care about and that you don't want to mistreat, so to speak. So you might be a little bit more careful, at least on the first track day, where you're still trying to figure things out. How well do the brakes hold up? How well does the engine temperature hold up? And again, an example of something that you do in a sim here without thinking about it, that you would not do in real life. Subconsciously, you always try to leave at least a little bit of a safety margin. Maybe not always, but in the corners where you think, okay, if I get this wrong, then this could be pretty dangerous. But yeah, overall, a lot more similarities than differences. The last thing that I would like to mention, which was apparent, is the way the tire and the road surface work together. You can feel that this is a simulation where everything seems to be a little bit more smooth than it would be in real life. For example, in this corner here, this right-hander in third gear, I could feel, let's drive like I did in real life, get to the apex, now floor it, and you could feel the individual rear wheels fighting for grip a little bit. You could feel the differential working. You could feel the rubber on the road slipping just a tiny little bit here and there. And you don't get that detail of interaction between the tire and the road here in Assetto Corsa, or at least not yet. And yeah, that was clearly different. The way the tires and the road surface interact at the limit was a little bit different in real life than it is here in the sim. And yeah, again, a little bit too much grip. I really tried to force drift there, and I think in real life that would have worked, but here the rear end I think has a little bit too much grip, or the front end as well. The car in general has a little bit too much mechanical grip maybe. But overall, again, a lot more similarities than there are differences, which, if you think about it, is actually quite astonishing. I mean, I remember times in the 90s where we drove kind of 4 pixels on screen and thought that was a car and thought that was awesome, and now we're talking about fine nuances here that yeah, it's just amazing how far Sims have come over the past 2 decades. And yeah, so to summarize the experience, this was a great way to prepare for the track day. I did only do maybe 1 or 2 hours on this track before I drove it for real here in Assetto Corsa, and as I said, I really had the feeling of knowing the track already when I drove it. Things like this, where you had this slight rotation there, mid-corner, that is exactly what I mean with the interaction between the tire and the road surface. In real life you had grip, and then you could maybe feel it a little bit, but I don't know, the transition between grip and drift is just a little bit different. It's hard to put that into words. It seems more gradual here in Assetto Corsa. In real life it was more hang on, and then it kind of broke loose all of a sudden just a little bit. But yeah, it's hard to put into words what I mean. But again, overall, maybe this is, in terms of the handling, maybe this is 90% of what I experienced in real life. 90% correct, 90% overlap, and maybe 10%, which is mostly how the car handles at the limit, were different. So yeah, that is pretty much all that I wanted to say about that. If you have any specific questions about the differences between real life and track, let me know in the comments. And yeah, I can't wait for the next track day, guys. I think it will be on the Nordschleife in June, but I can't promise that just yet. It depends a little bit on my work schedule, but I will try to make that happen. Why do I keep driving on the grass here on the left side, and why do I keep drifting this one? Anyway, this is it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed watching. Again, if you have any questions about specific points of driving this car and track combo for real versus driving it in Assetto Corsa, please let me know in the comments. And yeah, this is it. I hope you enjoyed watching, guys, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye bye.